right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CanCon's Corner. I apologize. I'm new to the Rumble Studio thing, and for some reason, it did not put the time up, even though I scheduled the stream. So, yeah, this was a 9:30 scheduled show, and I have no idea why it did not put that in the description. But we're learning as we go here with Rumble Studio, also streaming to YouTube. It's good to be back over there. Tonight's we got a special show for you because I'm joined by two friends of mine that I've known throughout this battle to restore election integrity in the United States of America and hopefully throughout the world. And I want to get right into it, folks. So I'm going to bring on my friends, Professor David and Aaron Clements. How are you two doing?
We're doing well, Brian. Thanks for having us.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. Nobody knows the subject matter tonight better than you two. You guys, well, there's one other person, your co-author on the B Pro piece, who's going to be joining us on Friday evening over on Why We Vote. So looking forward to that as well. But I want to bring you guys on tonight because you guys have been just absolutely grinding on the election integrity front for the last 5 years, it seems. And what just happened last week is mind-blowing to me, and I'm going to bring you guys here to help us all unpack this. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm definitely leaning hard to the bad thing side. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself in case somebody doesn't know who you guys are?
Well, I'm David, and this is my wife, Erin. And as you said, we've been part of the election integrity movement for quite some time now. We oversaw a forensic audit in Otero County, and Aaron really spearheaded that, in addition to partial audits in many other counties. And we've become great friends with all kinds of national security vulnerability experts, and I feel like we've met all kinds of people that have given us a nice cross-section of data to take a look at the systems. And so when we saw the latest acquisition of Dominion by a Liberty vote, a lot of red flags emerged. And I don't think it's really an either or scenario. I think that you've got good guys and bad guys, and they're trying to figure out what they can get away with. So part of me sees the possibility that the acquisition could have some good things, but to the degree that there's good things, it's because Trump is making it happen. But that doesn't mean that these corrupt vendors won't try to save their skin in any way possible. So I think it's a combination of both, but we're really, really happy to talk with you about it.
So you guys, and first I want to give you guys a plug here. So Professor, you've been back on YouTube now. The overlords have deemed that our speech is now acceptable speech. We're allowed to talk about these things. So before we even get started, where can folks find you over on YouTube?
I have no idea. I actually didn't get booted like you guys did. I get flagged for everything. So I never even got off the ground on YouTube. So it was kind of a dormant channel that I just didn't use. But if you plug in the professor's record, I'm sure that my channel will show up somewhere.
There you go. And you put out a great, I think it's like 23 or 24-minute video, kind of unpacking what I'm calling, I'm terming it the election machine blob, because that's what it is. It's this perpetuating cycle that we've been going through, and we can see all the way back to 2000, 2004, around there with the emergence of Smartmatic down in Venezuela, and kind of laid the foundation of the election apparatus now in this country, and how we see these companies just go from one company to the next. And every time there's a little bit of scrutiny or something comes up that's controversial around the company, they tend to get sold off. And so you did a great job. If you could just give an overview, maybe of just a quick timeline of what you documented in your little clip, well, not little clip, 25-minute video.
Well, I really owe a lot to Aaron, because Aaron and Jessica Palima were really the architects of spotting it 2 years ago. So I think they published an article back in September of 2023 about the significance of this company, B Pro, and No Inc., which merged together. And the reason why this entity is so important is that we're starting to see cheating take place in through integrated software that's internet connected, it's on the cloud. And it really is, I think, the most elegant way to subvert elections. I mean, we've covered things that can be done through the tabulator, which we owe a lot of that to Jeff Lindbergh. We've seen subversions of Microsoft SQL SQL that was demonstrated by Mark Cook. But if you really want to keep up with the cheat, you kind of have to evolve, even if you're a bad guy. And by having legal agreements that allow bad people to exist behind precinct firewalls, to have CISA and CIS basically have unfettered access. I think really if you want to cheat, the best way to do it is through the integrative software. So back to the emergence of Scott Leindecker. This is the guy that owned NoInc, that merged with BPro, that was using TotalVote, and he's being marketed as some kind of late in the game savior. And what people need to realize is that Scott Leindecker showed up on the scene for the most part in 2011. That's when we see NoInc. So he's had a front row seat through all of the different iterations. You've kind of got a 10-year period where it's Smartmatic to Sequoia, ES&S is in there. Dominion comes in and does some acquisitions. And Dominion and ES&S are kind of kings of the elections for over the past 10 years or so. But BPro is a major player using their poll book. So it was really Jessica and Aaron that wrote it up. And my challenge was, how do you provide a visual companion? Because it's, by definition, the system is designed to be confusing. I mean, the fact that we have to keep bringing up different names and corporate entities, as soon as you're 2 or 3 deep, you're like, well, okay, where am I? Who's responsible for what? And so you've got the blob. For me, it was kind of a Leviathan octopus that has all of these different tentacles and arms, but they really all trace back to the same body. And I think if we wanted to take a guess on what that body is, in some respects, it's the Smartmatic software design that seems to inhabit all of the different tabulators. But this TotalVote thing is a little bit different. And I think that's why I'm pretty nervous about who Leindecker says he is. There's been a video that surfaced today when he testified before some Canada government officials, where he, is basically taking an audit and telling everyone that TotalVote's not been found to have any vulnerabilities whatsoever, which flies in the face of much of the analysis that people like Aaron have talked about. And I'll go ahead and kind of give her an opportunity to share some of the subversions that we found in states through our friends.
Okay, so TotalVote is it's like a multi-module, all-inclusive software that does everything to do with the election except for scanned ballots. So now that they've acquired Dominion, now they actually do absolutely everything. So you can imagine if you have a vulnerability in a software that does everything to do with the election, you can manipulate every part of the election. So if you need extra voters in a state, you can inflate the rolls. If you need to have fraudulent absentee ballot requests, use the same software. You can submit those fraudulent ballot requests, have them delivered wherever you want. If you need to change the tabulated results, you can do that. If you need to monitor the turnout, you can do that. If you need to monitor any piece of equipment, TotalVote does all of this. TotalVote also has a module where it has a geolocation of voters. So if you need to spread your cheating out across all of the precincts in your county or your state, it can do that. So it's putting everything to do with the election on one piece of software. The software is cloud hosted. So it's actually impossible for there to be zero vulnerabilities, because by definition, when it's on the cloud, even the provider of the data storage can't tell you exactly where it's being stored, and they cannot tell you that it's secure because it's all online. So the other thing about it is that the EAC, especially the VVSG 2.0 that supposedly we're all supposed to be following by 2026, according to Trump's executive order that he signed earlier this year, that the election isn't supposed to be connected. That's explicitly stated now in the VVSG, but they're actually putting the entire thing on the internet. So there's no way to follow the VVSG. And and use total vote for your election.
And another point that's really important is that we're seeing these pseudo certifications, and Be Pro No Ink. I mean, excuse the terminology, but I mean it is kind of the Blob, as you mentioned. Um, got their poll books, quote unquote, certified and up to date with the latest standards, at least on paper. Now, we don't believe that that certification is legitimate if it was put up under any significant scrutiny. But we also have the news that Hart InterCivic, the tabulator brand, has also come up to speed on 2.0. And so if you just take these certification, awards being provided by the EAC at face value, you could come away from it saying, well, great, we're seeing progress. But when we look at the certifications of the past, whether it's from SLI compliance or Pro V&V, we know they're not worth the paper that they're printed on. And the other thing about this acquisition from Leindecker is that he's had a dry run with all of the vendors in the past several years. So in Hawaii, B Pro was working in tandem with Hart InterCivic. Well, with that ecosystem, we saw the backdating of 75,000 voters that could be real. Maybe they're fake. We don't know. But we saw an exploitation in the last election where Commissioner Ralph Cushney, found that there were 19,000 ballots where they couldn't find the origin. So clearly the system has been exploited there. And then in places like New Mexico, which we're much more familiar with, the B Pro Total Vote software was working in tandem with Dominion. So there was already a level of integration, and it was Aaron's research through FOIA and public records requests that we learned that there was a read-write capability where the SOS, Maggie Toulouse Oliver, was processing all of the election data on the cloud, which is illegal. So, so we've seen bits and pieces of the subversion at work, and now it's like all coalescing under one umbrella. And I just don't understand why people are so quick to give Scott Leindecker a pass, given not just the concerns, but actual exploitations. In New Mexico, it was Aaron's research that we found the voter rolls being inflated with such precision that on every day of the week, you could pretty much tell how many Democrats were going to be on the rolls, how many Republicans, and it was lockstep in all 33 counties. So that was made possible through Total Vote. So yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about.
So when you bring up Hawaii and the ballots without origin, most of the work that I've done in the research and covering other people's research as well, going back to our friends Kevin and Joe Rossi in Georgia, they had the same thing in Georgia. They had, I think it was 19,000 or 17,000 ballots that had no origin, but were in the original counts. Then we also saw, the same thing with the voter rolls being inflated and then deflated after the fact. And in Georgia, the relationship is no ink to Dominion. And so, they were running no ink down there in Georgia for the 2020 election. And then to try and fix that in the 2022 election, the state election board tried to pass a rule that you had to count the number of ballots. Apologize for a second there. That you had to count the number of ballots that were at each precinct, so you could ensure that the number of ballots checked in with the number of people that checked in, and they rejected that. They rejected that en masse, and that was just one of the most mind-blowing things to me.
Yeah, it is. And the EAC they have suggested standards of how you should reconcile your ballots when you're doing your canvass at the end of the night or the end of the election. And it says in there explicitly, you should be counting how many ballots you have. You should reconcile that with the number the tabulator tells you tabulated. So it is mind-blowing that they would say, well, the EAC is trying to disenfranchise voters, I guess, by making sure we have the right number of pieces of paper.
Yeah. So, I think just if people are wondering why this concerns us, it just shows you how sophisticated the PSYOP is. There's really no other word to use for it. That as soon as you think you've got a handle on the corruption, and let's be clear, It's the efforts of people like yourself, like us, that have put a spotlight on Dominion, and Dominion was no longer salvageable. And you've got other entities that are just as corrupt, if not more corrupt, like ES&S. And it looks like they're going through their own version of rebranding, or at least they're setting up something to akin to what's going on with Dominion. But here emerges this entity called the Liberty Vote, and all it takes is, the change of a name from Dominion to Liberty, and all of a sudden, we can just have confidence that this is a truly an American-owned company. And I have to remind people that John Paulos was pushed on Dominion's ties being tied to Toronto and Canada. And one of the reasons why they moved their location to Colorado was so that they could tell everyone that they were in fact American-owned. And nothing could be further from the truth. So you not only do you have the issue of past lies and a new scheme to kind of confuse the American voter, you still have the specter of what happened with Serbian interventions into what Dominion has used, Venezuelan ties with Smartmatic. And when you trace the tree, the Leviathan arms, back to that body, there's no way to extricate No Inc., B-Pro from the mix. They were part of the larger scheme. Because when we look at election subversions, it's not just, the tabulators, it's this assembly line. And one of the revelations that came from the Venezuelan whistleblower that Rasmussen and many others have been putting out there is that the bad actors are looking at the states and each of their ecosystems of products, and they know, okay, let's use subversion 1, 7, and 10 for Colorado, and we'll be able to cheat and do whatever we want there. And then we'll use subversion 3, 6, and 9 in Georgia. And so as long as you can account for the moving parts with different names, but understand that almost all of the states have similar functional capability, it's pretty easy to spot the cheat. And so now I've been to 49 states, all of which have a different combination. And within 2 or 3 minutes, I can pretty much identify how the cheat's going to be carried out just by knowing who the vendors are. Because if you've been exposed or exploited in one state in a specific way, it's not hard to expect that someone else can do it in another state.
Yeah, speaking of the Venezuelan whistleblower, the judge in Clerk Peters' case, her habeas case out in Colorado, dismissed it, but didn't dismiss it for its veracity, only dismissed it saying that it wasn't really relevant. So, hopefully maybe at some point there'll be a way to get that whistleblower into a courtroom to tell his story, because I've read that testimony now twice on air and twice, in my personal capacity. And as I read it, every single time I read it, reading through it is like an outline to what they did in the 2020 and 22 elections. You just read it and you're like, oh yeah, the man in the middle, that's the 10 machines in Georgia that nobody had accountability for. The internet connection in the middle of the night. Well, we know Jenna Griswold out in Colorado sent out a warning to all the clerks, reminding them to make sure that their machines didn't accidentally connect to the internet. We saw the BIOS passwords that Griswold had, that Colonel Smith discovered out in Colorado. I mean, all of these things that we keep seeing, and they're just like oblivious to it. They think we're stupid.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I don't know if Erin's got her thoughts on that, but the number of whistleblowers that have emerged, a lot of people are asking, well, why are they materializing now? And they just have to realize it wasn't safe to do so. I mean, if things hadn't turned out the way that they did in November of last year, we weren't going to hear from whistleblowers. So it's pretty cool to see someone from the other side really validate the gap filling that many people on our side, you start looking at, what we know, and then you start providing hypothesis on what has to be in those gaps. And to hear the whistleblower basically confirm what we speculated, it's pretty cool. It just shows you that there's a lot of brilliant election integrity advocates out there that piece this together. So I don't know if any of the revelations were particularly groundbreaking. It was like, yeah, we actually got it right. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I want to go back if we can, Aaron. You and Jessica, and how do you say your last name? Polemus?
Polema. Yeah,
Polema.
Polema. Mhm.
You guys wrote a fantastic article back in 2023. I think Joe Hoft had published it about B Pro, about Total Vote, and about their kind of integration with Knowing. And I was reading that just to catch up earlier this week, or over the weekend, excuse me, to just to make sure I'm all prepared. And I thought it was really fascinating how Total Vote actually came to be through just grants through Hava, which was an entire setup to usher in this machine era that we're in right now. So I didn't know, Aaron, if you could perhaps give us just a quick rundown of how Total Vote came to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually came about almost the same way the whistleblower described Dominion coming about, is that it was created with Hava grants, like you said, in South Dakota at the direction of the Secretary of State there for maybe a couple $100,000. And then the Secretary of State turned around and started giving it away to other states, including New Mexico, Nevada. It's in Oregon. It's all over the place. But he would just start giving it away. And then those other states would turn around and start paying B-Pro millions of dollars to continue to run this software for them that the taxpayers already paid for. So that's exactly what the Smartmatic whistleblower described, that Dominion was created for very cheap. And then the governments would start paying them millions of dollars. And basically the millions of dollars was the bribe to run the cheat, is how the Smartmatic whistleblower described it. And that, in my opinion, that's what it feels like with B-Pro also, because we know that as B-Pro was seeded throughout all these states, that they would promise upgrades, or they would make state-specific versions of their software. And lately, since about last year, Jessica published another article called "Where Did B-Pro No Ink Go?" And we found out that there were states like Pennsylvania and Oregon that were starting to cancel their multi-million-dollar contracts with B-Pro No Ink because they were failing to meet their deliverables on whatever the system upgrades they were supposed to provide. They never provided them. And so they've been getting fired. So somehow with these millions of dollars, they're just not able to provide anything to their customers. Another thing that Jessica figured out was, she lives in South Dakota, and that's where B-Pro supposedly has their office, where they run a couple dozen states elections out of this office. And it's in a strip mall. It's maybe 1,000 square feet office, and they're open about 12 hours a week. They have no phone number. You can't go inside, but somehow they've got the capacity to run 36 states elections and upgrade their software, and somehow receive these millions of dollars to provide this amazing software. So it just feels like a front. It doesn't feel real.
Well, it also, there's two more questions that are presented by it, which is, if you're being fired, where in the world did Leindecker get the capital to be able to, acquire a company that in theory could have a balance sheet of upwards of $800 million based on the Fox settlement alone? And then the other thing is, the whistleblower from Venezuela was talking about this thing called a war room. And it was actually Aaron's research that located contracts with Dominion that had an itemized designation for this war room function. And so, you think of war rooms as places for problem solving. We were basically being fleeced off of government subsidies, off the taxpayers' backs, for these guys to get paid and then use the opportunity to subvert the elections real time. And so one of the things that we try to highlight in, Let My People Go, we use this concept of a Ferris wheel. It's highly integrated. But if you've got certain things in place, whether it's a contract to exist behind the precinct firewalls, which you can accomplish through the CIS contract to deploy Albert sensors, which exist in all 50 states, you've got access. If you've got the integrated software, then you can really, really do things that are fairly seamless. And so even if you have a state that only paid for one of the modules that Total Vote has to offer, we're talking about a cyber digital world where if you're behind the firewall, what's to stop you from inflating voter rolls or deflating them, even if you didn't pay for that service? What's to stop you from monitoring it? And so, it's interesting that whistleblower talked about using the war room, but it's really, really insulting when you realize that we were getting charged or the taxpayers getting charged. We're paying for them to huddle together to figure out how to screw the American voter.
I want to pull up a specific segment from the article you guys wrote here. And let me just read this for everybody listening. Total Vote now handles voter registration, voter information, centralized election monitoring, ballot printing and design, electronic ballot delivery, electronic poll books, creation of the election canvas documents, voter signature capture, precinct management, redistricting tools, address verification, campaign finance, and even geolocation of voters. BPRO's contracts with their various clients also claim that Total Vote is now fully integrated with GIS, Geographic Information Systems, the National Change of Address, the United States Postal Service, the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Social Security Administration, the Electronic Registration Information Center, also known as ERIC, and other state and federal interfaces. And then it goes on to talk about, a contract here with Santa Clara County, saying that No Inc. and BPRO, discovered by an election integrity researcher, revealed that when a county uses their products, they turn over extremely broad powers for No Inc. BPRO/BPRO to access any networked or wireless devices remotely associated within that county or with the county. That's an incredible amount of access for one company to have. And now with the integration of Dominion, now it's the whole kit and caboodle now.
It's everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, in some ways it gives them such political cover because, again, Dominion has lied through their face about whether or not their tabulators hook up to the internet. And in theory, they're supposed to be air-gapped and closed off, not networked. We know that they've lied about that in a myriad of ways. But now, if you really let Total Vote, No Inc., Scott Leyendecker do what he does best, you can really actually truthfully say that no, we fixed Dominion. And all they have to do is actually abide by the closed system architecture that the Dominion tabulator was supposed to offer. But that just tells me that they're migrating the cheat into what Total Vote does best, which is what you just read on the screen there. And one of the things just to think about is that anytime you use Grok or you use AI, and you see how quickly you get answers and data. I want people to think about that being the power behind Total Vote. When you start processing data, they can literally fabricate and create narrative perception out of whole cloth.
Yeah. And it's not just the narrative perception, but they have everything, control of everything from the beginning of the record to the end. From the voter registration card at the DMV, they're directly connected to the DMV according to their own contracts. They're directly connected to ERIC, so you have your leftists bringing in their fake voter registrations or just making them up. Your illegal aliens can be added, and everything will match. So if you ever get another chance to do a forensic audit on an election and you get all the records, it will all match, and it can all be fraudulent because it's all under the control of one person.
Yeah. So if you're looking at a sophisticated algorithm, we saw, I think, aspects of this behind the scenes. I've often wondered about the stuff that Jeff O'Donnell put out on the Edison reports. We all saw those really, really cool visuals of voter registration or not voter, but election night reporting. And this weird oscillation phenomena. It's as if the algorithm's trying to solve where to put data and transfer it. Well, just given the layout and the architecture of what Total Vote offers, you can do that with not just election night reporting, but really virtually anything. And so when you start processing your election on the cloud and you start delivering your election results from the county or precinct up to the Secretary of State, and they start running all of the data and combining all of the data through the Total Vote software, I want people to think in terms of like, look, in microseconds, you can basically do a reconciliation, pump that flawed and manipulated data back to the precincts or the counties. And what do? After election night, they take a canvassing report, which Total Vote offers as part of their services. They bring in the clerk. The clerk tells everyone how great their elections were run, and then the counties rubber stamp that data. But it really doesn't originate. I mean, you could say it originates. You can argue that it originates from the county, but it really doesn't. There's so many things and vectors of attack to change that, and it's so beyond the depth of a county clerk to really understand that they're held hostage. And I think this goes back to what Aaron was saying with the attraction to using these vendors was, we'll get them in on the cheap through a gift, and then they're going to be so reliant and beholden to it that it's really easy to sign the check. And here we are 20 years in, and everyone is wholly reliant on these vendors.
Yeah. And so much of it is on the internet and electronic and able to be monitored from the first person that casts their ballot in the beginning of early voting, that when Leyendecker says we're going to have all paper-based elections, it doesn't cost him anything to say that, because he's got 30 days to make sure the paper's there, and they can do it all backdoor, all fraudulent. The clerk doesn't even have to know. Even Total Vote can say, we don't know. You just have to have a bad actor doing a man-in-the-middle operation. So the paper will be there, and there'll be no way to detect it with a system like this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because this idea that because it's so integrated, because they have so many metrics, because they have so many data points, because we've got early voting that's extended out weeks, because we see the phenomena of ballots emerging after election day and showing up, there's not a single blind spot where they can't cure and find the paper and basically have something that mirrors whatever digital subversions are taking place.
Well, and then if they do kind of get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, they can just kick the can down the road like they've done to Garland Favorito, who's going on over 1,100 days. I think he might be on 1,200 days now, waiting on his case to get assigned. They can tell the, Ed Martin, as the weaponization czar at DOJ, to kick rocks when he requests to look at the physical ballots. They can tell the state election board when Dr. Johnston subpoenas them and requests physical ballots, envelopes, and stubs. They can essentially use lawfare to prolong that, investigation. And by the time anything comes of it, you're already in not the following administration, but the administration after that. Right. And I mean, what kind of republic is this? I've often said when President Trump, jokes about running for a third term, I think that if the Joe Biden administration is proven to be fraudulent, which I think all three of us firmly believe it was entirely a fraudulent administration, President Trump was denied that ability to have 2 consecutive terms where he could really effectuate his agenda and put his agenda, into full force. It's like he gets chopped up in the middle by a fake and stolen election. He's owed those consecutive terms, in my opinion. But
Amen.
I've war gamed that, and I don't know if the Constitution provides for a guarantee of consecutive terms. So there's an issue of that. And then there's also, something that I've been riffing over on, the idea of continuity of government. And let's say that this is a glorified single term because of what happened in 2020. You've got a lot of the Anon community talking about him pointing to the immigration chart and saying that he left office on April 1st, 2020. It's a really crazy and bizarre thing to say unless there's a reason for saying that. And then to add more fuel to the fire, him showing up to Quantico and telling everyone I'm the 45th, 46th, and 47th president. But so my analysis, I really want there to be just a single good election that allows him to carry all the way to 2026 and have him run for 2028. However, my research seems to suggest that the Constitution's pretty dead set on the length of a term, even if you're under continuity of government. So I don't know how he escapes that. I think the way that we get him in 2028 is to run a paper-based election in 2026 and have MAGA throw out the uniparty. And I think we would be so tremendously thankful that the idea of a constitutional amendment revision or cancellation to allow him to do it legally would not be beyond the pale. But I mean, I've actually been focusing on that a lot. That was going to be one writing assignment that I was looking at. And no matter how many things I looked at, I'm not sure that I could even persuade myself that Trump is entitled to another election unless we have some form of amendment. But if I'm wrong, I'd be happy if that.
You know, I don't think you're wrong. I even went back and read the Constitution to ensure that it says that it doesn't clarify that. But when you think about like states, like in Florida, our governor is limited to 2 terms unless there's a break in between those terms. So like DeSantis, his second term, he has to sit out this next election, but he can run again after that for a 3rd term. So, I don't know. At the state level, it seems that it's clearly defined that you're limited to 2 consecutive terms in the states that are. There's some states that don't have that limitation. So it would be interesting. I think the only other president that's ever had a broken term was Grover Cleveland, and there wasn't allegations. There was no fraud that I know that I'm aware of that was proven in between, that term and that middle gap term.
Yeah. So the question really becomes, what do you do with 2024, right? Because that's going to be the problem is that, I don't see there being any mention of consecutive terms because that wasn't within the purview of the founders. In fact, even Grover Cleveland, his 2 terms predated the constitutional amendment limiting it to 2 terms. That was really a byproduct of people being worried about FDR staying in the presidency forever. So I think the problem is there's going to be gaps because, the founders just couldn't have conceived of the situation that we're in. But I think we could all agree that the founders were more passionate about limiting power. And so I think the fairest inference would be to say, look, it's 2 terms. I think there'd be many people that would have loved to have exploited that loophole from the Bush dynasty, Obama, to come in. And so I don't think we need to stress or try to stretch the law to get Trump in. I think if we get a clean election through paper and hand counting, it would be such an overwhelming response. We would find out for the first time we're not a 50-50 nation, but like an 80-20 nation. And of course, there's no one else that has the pedigree of Trump that we would clamor for. He truly is a Washington-like figure that we wouldn't want to leave. And then part of it might just be strategic on Trump's part to avoid any notion that this is a lame duck presidency. If this is truly the last time that he could run, I think if you run an election, it's not about really winning the House or the Senate for me, because most of the people that are there right now never went out on record and said that the election was rigged and stolen, and most have protected the ecosystem that we're using now. So I would love to see primaries where we have radically different options next year. And I think with that type of Congress, it would not be difficult at all for a MAGA Senate and a MAGA House to do this the right way. And I hope they try.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe if he delegitimizes Biden's 2020 victory, he could delegitimize his own 2024 victory and make himself eligible. Say, hey, I wasn't actually elected in 2024, so I'm therefore eligible again. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just real quick to your 75-25 point or 80-20 point. I think it's interesting that when President Trump spoke at the the Smith dinner, the Catholic dinner that they do in DC, he said, we're a 50-50 country. We're more like 75-25. And, I took that as a very, a very, like he said that deliberately, I think. I want to go back to the election stuff and kind of game plan a little bit or theorize a little bit the potential of, I think we both would agree that this merger between Liberty Vote and No Inc., essentially giving one company control of massive amounts of our election we both, I think, would say we'd look at it as a bad thing, all 3 of us. But let's just play a game here and say that this was a good thing. Now, when this news broke, I think, as far as I know, I think National Pulse Raheem Kassam was the first one to break this, and he had that article, "Ding Dong, Dominion's dead." And I wildly disagreed with it. Immediately was like, Dominion's not dead. It's just been rebranded. This is the status quo. This is what they've done. Smartmatic to Sequoia, Sequoia to ESNS, ESNS, Diebold. Dominion takes all of them and absorbs all of them except for ESNS. It's been a game. And then with Aaron's work, B Pro to Total Vote to No Ink, and now No Ink to Liberty Vote. One thing that Kassam said in his responses to me when we were engaging back and forth was, I was in the White House meeting. You weren't in the White House meeting, which, kind of felt like a little bit of a flex. But that's interesting, because that means that there was a meeting in the White House talking about this before it happened. And that wasn't lost on me. The other thing that's interesting about this is, you already alluded to how much did he pay for it. There's no transparency around this whatsoever, other than Leyendecker bought them. We don't know how much the purchase was for. We don't know any other details about it, but we know that there was a deal where Dominion had to drop the lawsuits against OANN, Sidney Powell, and Rudy Giuliani, but left remaining standing the Lindell and Patrick Byrne lawsuits. So, these are some, kind of things that you have to look at from the outside and say, why would you do this if this wasn't necessarily a good thing?
Well, I had some access to information involving folks reaching out to Rudy Giuliani. I did, when I was speaking with a close representative of his, there wasn't a settlement in place, but it was clear that entities were reaching out, and not only reaching out to settle, but trying to gain favor with Trump, knowing that Giuliani's a good friend of his. So while I appreciate Raheem Kassam, saying that I was in there, and I'm going to say it was a flex, because he also said that there's no one that came out harder on election fraud. It's like, that's not true. And whatever you did for a week, you didn't sustain it for 4 years. He's been largely silent on it. It really makes me think of Bindergate, the Epstein files. We had a bunch of people in the White House. And so what does that mean? And I know a lot of people in the White House, even now, aren't our friends. And I've known people that are our friends that have had access. And they'll tell you that deep state fight is alive and well. There are advisors that want to wait out the clock, that want business as usual. So there are people like Seth Keshel, who I know has advised people in the White House, and I trust Seth implicitly. But I've heard the scuttlebutt of many people trying to keep the machines alive. In fact, I know of a particular entity I won't disclose right now that has been doing a pitch to keep machines in place. And they have the ear of many people that I hope will get rid of them. So I think this might be closer to what Trump has done in the past in a completely different area, which is, I think he's already told you what he's going to do. And all the people that want to posture and wear themselves out and pitch the machines, at some point, he's using that information to kind of figure out, the bad actors on the playing board. And the reason why I say this is, look at the secret strikes in Iran. Even his own head of ODNI, Tulsi Gabbard, was unaware of what transpired there. And so if you're not going to read in someone like Tulsi and still try to achieve the grounds for a peace that kind of neutralizes Israel's, consistent threat that, the boogeyman's there, they've got nukes. And Trump really single-handedly took that argument away and made, Middle East peace possible by removing that. That tells me he's really, if he's telling you, I want paper, single day voting, we got to get rid of the mail-in ballots. All the people that are kind of giving us this idea that they're rehabbing the system and coming up to speed with the VVSGs, I don't think they're going to get their way at the end of the day. So to the degree that you can kind of put a figurative gun to Leindecker's head by acquiring Dominion, what I want to look for is disclosures, because this will really give you credence with the question that you're asking is, can this be the equivalent of what Elon Musk did when he acquired Twitter, rebranded it as X, and then you had Matt Taibbi show up through a series of disclosures on how bad and how naughty Twitter was on censorship. So if we see Leyendecker singing the song of, oh my God, we've acquired Dominion, and let us tell you what we have found through the internal emails, I think that would lend credence. But absent something like that, I think we have to work with what we know and what we've seen. And given what we have fought for, Brian, to get rid of these corrupt election vendors, it's not enough for me, with all due respect to Raheem Kassam, to say that he was in a meeting, because Raheem Kassam has been absent in the election integrity movement as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Did you want to add something, Aaron?
Oh, I don't know. I got an email on January 21st, 2025, this year, like right the day after the inauguration. And they said, so when are we going to get rid of the machines? So, of course, I don't know the answer, but I do know that Trump promised us that when he came to New Mexico, we had a Trump rally right before the election. And the first thing out of his mouth was, this is the last time I'm going to ask you to vote in a rigged election. Our next election is going to be one day, paper ballots, voter ID, hand counted. That's what he said from the stage. So I believe he keeps his promises, and that's what he's going to deliver. But then I have to think, if I was him, how would I roll out an honest election? I think he has to have a lot of ducks in a row before he lets the deep state know, you are going to lose this tool. Because I think they would do absolutely anything to prevent him from taking away rigged elections, because at the end of the day, they can let him have all kinds of victories in the short term, and they're very patient people, and they'll wait another decade to get us exactly back where they wanted us, under Hillary in 2016. So they'll wait him out and let him have some short-term victories as long as they can keep this rigged election. So if I was Trump, I would let them think they're keeping rigged elections as long as I possibly could, until I said, okay, we're not doing this anymore.
And then that gets to how in the world does Trump effectuate that promise? And I've wargamed this with so many brilliant attorneys, but I'll tell you right now, most of those attorneys only know the civilian justice system. And even people like Peter Tickton, I've heard, have come to the same conclusion, that you'd have to start looking at Title 50, Article 2 power, a national security framework for Trump to really be in a position where he's not asking, he's ordering, he's telling you. And he's got to be able to declare things from a framework of plenary authority, meaning he's not relying on the legislature that's been captured to come in and codify what he's saying. He's not relying on perhaps a captured Supreme Court to rule in his favor. This is truly a Lincoln-esque time where, if you have knowledge of a digital invasion and a digital rebellion taking place, then you have to take care and faithfully execute the prerogatives of the commander-in-chief through a national security paradigm. And I think he's prepared to do that. I think the meeting in Quantico was really optically really interesting. It's very reminiscent of the speech of Patton taking the stage in the movie. And I've heard from reliable sources. I've seen some stuff that I couldn't validate, but someone that I know in counterterrorism and in the cyber world, that there were many people that were let go that day. And so it wasn't just a speech from Pete Hegseth telling people to stop being so fat and to pass PT tests, that there were many, I don't know the number, but it was not a small number, where people were notified to resign or were ordered to excel elsewhere. So that tells me there's more to the puzzle. And then the other thing I've written about is this curious development of 600 JAG officers assisting with immigration proceedings, and 20 being sworn in DC. And for someone who's run law enforcement agencies, that's the most bizarre thing that I can think of. You would never do that. It's not to say that they couldn't fulfill those duties, but you look at peacekeeping in D.C., most attorneys fresh out of law school cut their teeth doing garden variety misdemeanor work, vagrancy, domestic violence, DWI. You wouldn't bring in military veterans that are trained in courts martial to alleviate the load, and you certainly wouldn't get that with 20 of them. And then the same thing with the 600 JAGs that are being deployed, I think, throughout 90 plus jurisdictions to help with immigration. You could say that that helps, given the numbers that Kristi Noem's talked about with, I forget, 400,000 plus arrests. They certainly need help. But my view of immigration law, because I've had to deal with it a lot here at the border as a prosecutor, is it's pretty rote. There's a small list of kind of boxes. So you go through these hearings, and it's a mill. You don't bring in JAGs to conduct mill work. So this lends some credence to the idea that you're going to need liaisons that can kind of split the difference between what a military commission can do and what the civilian court system performs. And actually learned through some great anons through an interview that I just did that there were amendments to the UCMJ to change the way that court martials and proceedings were carried out, I think in 2019, to try to combine and blend elements of the civilian system along with the military system. So that's been validated and verified. And so now that I see what I'm seeing right now, one, why would you have done that? And why would you deploy 620 plus JAGs throughout the country? So when you add it all together, because it's so mind blowing to think of that this is a possibility, and I recognize that. But I think it's just as absurd to walk past it, to walk past Trump's statements. I think that's unforgivable as well. So people can accuse me of having a little bit of hopium here, but I think it's absolutely insane that people chalk up Trump's statements about being the 46th president, about doing all these things as like a misstep, or he's just, not all there.
Putting the auto pen picture between his two, photographs, instead of a picture of Joe Biden. I'm with you there 100%, over on the other platform I'm on, Badlands. I mean, that's our founder. That's how he, that's his claim to fame, is the Devolution Continuity of Government series. And when you look back, as much as the three of us know about what happened in 2020, you got to scratch your head and say, how the hell did this not get a real legitimate investigation, given all the stuff that's come out that we find out in the further on down the road, but the people close to this had to have known this. Like Georgia not doing any of the signature verification in Fulton County, the stuff that you guys uncovered in New Mexico. I mean, who had New Mexico on the radar of election fraud? Colorado, my co-host Ash and the work that her and Holly and Kaysen and Colonel Smith did out there doing their canvassing. Liz Harris down in Maricopa, the folks in Michigan. There's just so much. Audit the Vote PA. There's so much work that showed that this is not on the up and up, but it kind of just got swept under the rug. And if there was a plan in place, this is the way it would have had to be. Because if, and I say this all the time, if President Trump had the 2020 election overturned, this country would have devolved instantly into just sheer chaos, because people did not know how bad it truly could get. They didn't know, the chaos in the Middle East, the Ukraine-Russia war, the massive inflation, the crazy amounts of debts, the funding of these NGOs and the Gladio-esque operations that have been going on. So I feel like it had to be this way. I know it sucks to say that because a lot of people, died, but this is a war. This is, as General Flynn says, this is 5th and 6th gen warfare. And unfortunately, there's casualties in war.
Yeah, there's a lot of collateral damage, and I, one of the things that I wrote about and put in one of my recent videos is I really think that Trump tried to reverse engineer the diagnosis offered by Yuri Bezmenov. The 4 stages where you've got demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and the normalization. And you think about just the slogan alone, "Make America Great Again." It's a moralizing statement. And he started protecting the flag and things that people were quibbling over. Well, you can't do that. I have free speech and stuff. I think the messaging is you're going to honor our country. You're going to believe that America's great. And so there's a moralization that counters demoralization. When you start looking at destabilization, the signing of the Abraham Accords, when you see peace in the Middle East, solving 7 wars, he is showing stability in a way that is just unparalleled. No one's done that before. You look at crisis. Look at how he's dealing with crisis, and some of the work that's been unveiled by Doge. So you've got Scott Bessent, kind of an unheralded hero that is now tracing and tracking funds related to Antifa and the designation of them being a terrorist organization. And I think it was today that I forget if it was Kristi Noem or Tulsi Gabbard, someone, it might have been Anna Luna, that listed that sheet of, God, was it $270 million to fund the No Kings protests and rallies through George Soros and Arabella Advisors and all of those groups. So it's like now they have all of this information that's finding its way, that's showing this web for us to neutralize the manufactured crises that have been put out in the media. And I think the counterweight to normalization is accountability. You'll notice that Trump is big on never letting anyone get away with the idea that the election in 2020 was anything but rigged and stolen. He's never conferred legitimacy to Biden. And you're seeing these indictments of Comey, Bolton, many more are coming. So the fact that we're entering into the accountability phase where we can actually believe that maybe we aren't crazy, maybe there was a plan, but in order to deal with everything that you just mentioned, Brian, of the enormity of our problems, there's really no other way than to see this as a blessing, that actually if he would have won 2020 and we just swept under the rug all of these hidden secrets that many of us learned through deep dives and critical thinking, we wouldn't have been prepared to take the baton from Trump when he promised us, when he put his hand on the Bible and said, "I'm going to give you back your country." We wouldn't have really known the significance of what he was trying to give back to us. And now through so much heartache and the collateral damage and people that have lost their careers and canceled, this makes it worth it. Knowing that this was the evil and the darkness that we were up against, was all of this was worth it.
So using kind of that framework that, it had to be this way, President Trump, we've known what was going to happen, whether it was a continuity of government operation, whatever the case might be. Something clicked in my head that I completely forgot about. It's one of those kind of things you forget about. We've studied this so hard, over the last 5 years. In 2010, when Dominion bought Sequoia Voting, that purchase had to be approved by CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. They met over that acquisition. I wonder if there had to be an a meeting of CFIUS in order for Dominion to sell back into the United States, and if there was any involvement, because their meetings are classified. You can't get minutes on them. And for those that don't know, CFIUS is all of the cabinet members. It's a panel, and they vote on, essentially they oversee any investment into the U.S. and vice versa. And so I kind of wonder, when you look at the, again, I'm trying to paint the Liberty vote in a positive light, or the potential for a positive light. Leindecker's come out and said, we're going to re-onshore the stuff, and then turned around and said it's just not possible to do that, which was really bizarre. He's promised us a third-party audit, which, why do you need to do that? Just go to DEF CON and watch them decimate that thing. Just go look at Halderman in the Curling v. Raffensperger case when he decimated that thing. Just look at Clay Parikh when he testified in Kerry Lake's Ninth Circuit appeals in his deposition there, when he said, they didn't let me go any further, but I could have destroyed this. I can hack all these machines in under 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They don't need any more evidence that these machines are beyond vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just, when I look at all this, I kind of wonder if this is another part of the plan.
Could be. I think if I was gonna take it out, it might be helpful to have it all under one roof,
Right.
because now it's all consolidated, and if you're gonna take out one thing, that guy's now in charge of 36 states, I think is the number. So you could pretty quickly, if you took one person out, one entity out, because it's just too vulnerable to use for national security reasons, that'd be an easy way to do it. And then you'd have the narrative cover that it was a Republican that said, I admit this isn't good. And so that, I mean, that helps his narrative too, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I also think that our responsibility is different than the president's. And this is where, I've always cautioned the anonymous community that if there is a plan, and even though they're asking you to trust it, I mean, I trust God and I trust his sovereignty, and I trust that he put us here for a reason. And I think we are carrying out our divine purpose. I think you are, Brian. I know Aaron has. But I just, I really fear passivity. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, look, I can't risk giving Scott Linedecker a pass. And so we're going to be as fact filled and truthful. We're not going to be mean about it. But the fact of the matter is, no one should get a pass. No one should be gaslit and saying, Brian, where were you in the White House meeting type of thing. It's like,
Right.
no, until these systems are literally buried because of the untold destruction. I mean, you want to talk about COVID deaths, you want to talk about mask wearing, all of that was derivative and downstream from rigged elections going back 20 plus years. And so that death toll demands accountability. And the only way that we're going to approximate accountability is if this Leviathan slave master is put in the grave. And so I just don't think, not only can we not afford it, we need to be louder than ever to signal to Trump that do not go along with this. Do not let these people get their tentacles, redisposed and recalibrated throughout the ecosystem. We can't survive it, because here's the deal. Next year really is going to be the kind of the showdown.
Yep.
I mean, sure, we got Trump in 2024, but if we weren't doing our due diligence and weren't holding a spotlight on people like Scott Linedecker, and somehow we don't get a paper-based election and the Trump experiment's over, I think many of us would want to redo, but you're not going to get one. So I think we got to keep the spotlight as bright as we can on every one of these vendors.
I agree with you 100%. We've got a little over a year until the 2026 midterm. So, while I'm willing to play with the idea that perhaps this is part of the plan, it better come to fruition very quickly, because, you're not going to be able to, I don't think you'll be able to drop this 2 or 3 months before the election. It'll be in sheer pandemonium, and nobody will, they'll say, we got to vote the way that we vote because that's all we know. That's the system that's in place. What another thing that I thought was just interesting is, I know you guys have played the Dallas County ES&S Express vote poll pads that they had. They're incrementing. Do you know who replaced them when Texas decided to get rid of them?
Yeah, no ink this year. Yeah.
And so, I kind of wonder, I mean, I have a lot of concerns about no ink, but I don't know of anything personally. I mean, maybe you guys know off the top of my head that I could look at and be like, well, no ink's really bad actor in that regard.
As far as like catching them on election night, incrementing votes, I don't think we have that, but they have voter registration, they have election night reporting, we have plenty of impossibilities going on there. They have so in New Mexico, going back probably 3 or 4 elections, we found emails from our Secretary of State to every county clerk in the states letting them know that there's a planned outage of no ink software. The total vote software is going to go down at 6 p.m. on election day. And there's absolutely no legitimate reason, that you would have a planned outage of your key software on the key day, the one day it has to perform, and you're going to do a planned outage at 6 p.m. when polls close at 7, unless you needed to install your last minute plugin to make your last minute adjustment so your election night reporting matches your planned sheet for the ballots that you're going to bring in the back door. I mean, we have plenty of things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as explicit as, oh, look, they just added 1,000 voters in this location or this location last minute.
Yeah. And let's be honest, that was such a fortuitous thing, because most people have outlawed or threatened people that it's illegal to have recording devices that could be firmly on a poll book. Who's to say that it hasn't happened? But again, when you read that document and you see just how much total vote encompasses, when you start looking at 28 plus jurisdictions and election night reporting, one of the things that we saw through Draza Smith's work is this PID controller type behavior on election night reporting. Now, you could say that could be purely in the hands of Seidel or some of the Edison type groups, but Total Vote has carved out a niche on election night reporting. So in theory, there's got to be some level of interfacing. So in the article / video that I put out, it's a lot like the Spider-Man meme, where the chameleon mimics and looks like Spider-Man, and everyone's pointing at each other in bewilderment. And so we're kind of feeding that right now. It's like, well, are we sure it's this or this? It's like, that's why this is so important, is that by being that integrative Ferris wheel, they really do have a means into all of these different vectors. And so that's election night reporting. So when we see those batches of votes coming in 50-50 ratios over and over again, some of those jurisdictions were total vote jurisdictions. I mean, we can't look past that. And then the voter registration inflation anomalies, I'm sure it takes place. What we saw in Hawaii and New Mexico has taken place in other places, but we were one of the few people that were willing to do an audit, to get beat up and bloody. And it took everything in our power to get our audit to the finish line. We had Congress that was trying to shut us down, issuing subpoenas for communications. We had attorneys that were working with the commission to slander and destroy our reputations. We had political operatives that were staging videos that they were intimidated by our canvassers. So when you actually try to get some accountability of the anomalies that you see, what you see in most places are people saying, forget this. This is not worth ruining my life over. But in the few areas like Georgia, like New Mexico, like Hawaii, where people have actually dared to risk upsetting the status quo, if you look for it, you find it. And I think that's the salient point. Jessica Palima looked for corruption in South Dakota. She found it. And the only places that can kind of, hold themselves out as paragons of virtue are the places where they've refused to give election records of any kind. I mean, that's the only places where we have not found fraud, are places where they've refused to give us cast vote records or some of the risk limiting reports and stuff that they have there.
So I want to ask a question, like, and I know this is pure speculation because we don't know any of the details of the transaction for Dominion, but with Fox News owing $787 million, I think Newsmax, what was it, 63 or 67 million that they owed from their settlements. Why, first and foremost, does that money, is that now Leindecker's money, or is that money that goes to Staple Street, Dominion, Poulos, and all them?
It would be completely dependent on the language of the agreement. Now, people sell companies because it's in their benefit. It's beneficial for them to do that. Usually it's monetary, or maybe there's some liabilities that they can limit. But from what was released, it seemed to suggest that liabilities and criminal prosecutions were still on the table for Dominion, which was interesting. So it's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That, it seems like, going based on how everything works in the election sphere, as soon as the heat starts getting turned up and, we find out about the programmers in Serbia, that's critical infrastructure. That's against the law for Serbians to be involved in our elections in any way, shape, or form, if it's critical infrastructure. I've had this conversation with Colonel Smith many, many times on some of our shows. But I wondered, like, what would be the purpose of having a deal? And I'm assuming it came from Leindecker's side on this to terminate the lawsuits against Giuliani, Powell, and OANN, all three of them, because I mean, you're almost a slam dunk to win after Dominion settled for 787. I always said Dominion settled, and I don't even know if they'll ever actually pay that money, but they settled because then it's going to turn the screws on Newsmax, who's their closest rival. And, a settlement like $787 million would bury Newsmax. They wouldn't be able to recover the way Fox News can. And it just doesn't make sense to me. Am I overlooking this or looking too hard at this?
No, I think the appropriate way to look at it is that, look, the deep state is just as cunning and strategic as Trump and the good guys are. And so I see this as them hedging their bets. Like, look, Giuliani's kind of been brought to bear through the lawfare that was deployed against him by Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss. It took a toll. And he has exhibited some willingness. And I think this is usually when you're talking about people that are older, they don't know how much time they've got left on this earth. I mean, Rudy Giuliani has been fighting for a really long time. And to the degree that you can wrap something up and have a semblance of a quality of life while we try to defeat the monster that's there, maybe it makes sense for him to entertain a settlement. And maybe it makes sense for attorneys for Smartmatic and Dominion to figure out if they could extricate themselves because he's got the ear of the president. So I think this is strategic on their part, but you've got the indictments that just took place against Smartmatic. And so I was advising people that I know that were close to him, like, hold out, like, don't do it. I mean, there's going to be leverage. They're scared. The reason why they're inviting a discussion with you to settle, where they were unwilling to take policy limit settlements from insurance providers in years past, is because they're scared that Trump can do the nuclear option. So I think my framework is that they're working and securing anything that will curry favor to ensure their survival over the next 3 years with Trump. And as long as you have someone that's willing to play ball with you, then it's attractive. But notice Mike Lindell and Patrick Byrne are different. They're younger. They are all in. They seem to have a fight in them that's a little bit different. And maybe they're not as calculated and strategic as Giuliani in looking at things. But, Patrick Byrne has kind of played this triple agent asset role for so long that I don't think his currency in this world is really about money. I think it's about being close to the game and playing it and exposing it. So I think to someone like him, it's like 200 million, 75 million, whatever his worth is, it's not what gets him out of bed each morning. And it makes him extremely unpredictable for people like that. And Mike's the same way, in a different way. He's not an addict with crack, but I think he's an addict to the highs and lows of the battle of election reform and election security. And so I think they're wild cards. And I don't think that the Smartmatics of the world can even risk trying to get into a room with Mike or Patrick Byrne. So I think that's probably the reason for it. But I don't see good faith. I think these folks, if they could have the opportunity to slit the throat of everyone in the movement, if they could, they would.
Well, we can start to wrap up here. I want to be respectful of y'all's time, but it's not lost on me that Leindecker did work under Ed Martin for quite some time in Missouri. And, Eagle Ed Martin has been pretty verbal about the 2020 election for quite some time. And, he's getting the ball rolling, or at least attempting to, for the DOJ in Georgia. And I'm sure there's probably some other communications that we don't even know about, investigations that we don't even know about, or at least I don't know about. So I'm trying to remain optimistic a little bit.
Well, Brian, I think, again, it's not our job to just, pick Ed Martin like he's a football team. And
Agreed.
Of course, we're rooting for the truth. And I see a lot that I like about Ed. I see a lot of messaging. He talked about certification with Tucker Carlson, which was really cool to see someone talking about election certification in a very nuanced way. I met him recently, and he seems to have this energy about him that he knows a lot more than he's letting on. But I can't validate that. And a lot of people have been frustrated with Todd Blanche as someone who seems to be uh, interrupting or destroying some of the efforts that we've been pursuing, in particular, the release of Tina Peters. And so, on the one hand, I was actually part of a group that facilitated Ed Martin's first phone call with Tina Peters in prison. And he tweeted about that. And it's like, awesome. We see that. And then we hear a scuttlebutt that Todd Blanche was responsible for maybe putting the kibosh on a release for Tina Peters as a federal witness on September 11th, which would have been her birthday. And you really don't know what's true, because then in social media, they'll take selfies together and they'll try to placate, their critics that we're all friends. And so you just can't tell if there's a larger game afoot, and you'll drive yourself crazy. So the way that I can retain my sanity is, look, I'm hoping and praying that Ed Martin is a complete patriot, and that perhaps his relationship with Leyendecker going back is something really, really sophisticated. But I'm going to make sure that Ed Martin knows through our work that Leyendecker has, I think, election blood on his hands from the deviations and the vulnerabilities that have been exploited over the past decade. And that's something I can control.
All right. So before we wrap up here, and thank you so much, not just for your hard work for this conversation, but your hard work in elections has been incredible. It's been an absolute honor to know you guys and be able to associate and have you guys on shows. I know I don't do them as much anymore. Now that YouTube's letting us back and Rumble's getting their stuff together, I've been doing more. So hopefully we can get you back here soon to talk some more, because you guys know so much about the elections, and you guys have worked so hard and uncovered so much that, what was it? What was your thing with Jeff Lenberg? Was like a 4-hour presentation that the three of you did in New Mexico. I mean, that was
it might have been longer than that. And
how's he doing? Have you heard from him lately? Is he good? I know he kind of got burned out,
Jeff is working as hard as he's ever worked. And that's all I can say, is that there are many good people that, even though you don't see them, they're not done with helping us get our elections back.
I've always had an incredible respect for Jeff Lenberg and the work that he's done. I cite him often when I talk about Coffee County and some of the things in Otero and his logic and accuracy theories, and just a brilliant man and somebody that is a blessing to election integrity. So I'll give you guys the floor if you want any closing thoughts, or if you want to share your socials where people can follow you. And please, if you're not yet, which I'm sure most of you guys are, follow them.
Closing thoughts?
Well, thanks for having us on, Brian, and we echo your sentiments. We really appreciate all your work. It's been absolutely amazing, and your friendship is really special to us. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I got to see a resurfacing of Nick Masseter, which was really cool.
That's good.
Look at that beard now.
Yeah, and kind of an unheralded or unsung hero that was carrying a huge weight on communicating stuff unlike anyone else. So if Nick sees this, we give him a special thanks, and we hope he's doing well. But for me, really, I've got a Substack that I'm pushing. Just search for Professor David Clements and you'll find it. And we put out weekly articles and video, kind of short films each week is the goal, that really tries to distill really, really complicated subjects in something that I think is accessible. So that's really what I'm pushing. But if you want to follow me on X or Rumble, just go to my website, theprofessorsrecord.com, and there's buttons for all of the social media that I belong to. And I would love to have people follow and share the work that we're putting out there. But this past week was really my attempt at visually honoring the work of Jessica Palima and Aaron in their writing, because they've been prophetic in certain ways about seeing the cheat go this way. And I don't think it's going to stop with a cloud-based system. I really think that if the enemy had their druthers, it would be blockchain, AI, and where things can compute and be processed so fast that there's really no way to ever audit, because perception can be manipulated in such an amazing way and a terrible way through AI. And that's where we're at right now. We're at this precipice where when AI gets its hooks into our elections, I don't know if there's going to be a way for us to extricate ourselves out of it unless we have the courage to unplug from all of these open systems. And so that's our prayer.
Amen. Real quick, if you don't mind, I had 2 Rumble rants, and one of them is a question that you might be able to answer. Ghostsmith 801 says, "Can love the convo. The corrupt narrative will never be given back." I hope you're right on that, and I will do everything I can to ensure that. True Deplorable said, "Love the Clements. We have paper ballots with ES&S tabulators in North Carolina. Each polling place has one express vote touchscreen. As chief judge and judge, what can I watch for at the precinct level?"
Well, you can watch the theater because ultimately what you have to be able to see is what's happening to the software that resides in those systems. So it looks like we're talking about ES&S tabulators. And ES&S, will just remind people, has a terrible track record when it comes to honesty. They swore up and down for many years they had no internet connectability. And it was reported, I think, in 2014 that there are 14,000 chip modems embedded in their DS200s, which are still in use in most rural counties. They've got the big boys in the urban areas. And then the other thing that they lied about and continue to lie about is whether their machines can export a cast vote record. And I've seen them lie time and time again that their machines cannot give out and produce this vital record that puts to rest whether or not your machines have been subverted. And the odd thing is when they're under oath in places like Louisiana or in places trying to secure a bid for a contract, when they're asked that question, they've had to answer it honestly, which means that they have lied. Unfortunately, secretaries of state have parroted. So to the gentleman that's an election judge, use as much pressure to get access and demand those vital records, because I just tell people, like, look, it's really easy to make a liar out of me about whether your elections with ES&S in North Carolina are rigged or not. There are a few documents that will help us get to the bottom of it. But with the emergence of No Ink and Total Vote, our days of being able to really determine the cheat, I don't think that the American public's ready for just how elegant the subversion's going to be. So while you can, keep demanding things like cast vote records, because that's going to tell you whether or not those machines were rigged or not. It's not going to be, I'm staring at a poll pad, hoping to God that, I can see like a plug being connected to it. What is it going to tell you? So those are my thoughts. If Erin's got other insights, she's the engineer.
No, I mean, from the precinct level, the way it's set up is that they want it to look just perfect, for all those election workers who are honest people. And so a lot of the rigmarole goes on where you can't see it. But every now and then, precinct workers do catch really amazing things, like the ones with the poll books in Texas where you saw the numbers. So just keep an eagle eye on everything. I mean, we've had stories of precinct workers noticing that the tabulators were incrementing by like 200 after one person had voted. So that these things like that do happen. So we need those precinct workers there, keeping an eagle eye on everything and reporting anything that isn't right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we've learned is that to the degree that the subverters of our elections will facilitate a truly organic way of cheating, they prefer to do that. And early voting, when you've got the metrics on absentee ballots sent out and returned, you basically have a rough approximation of what the delta would be between Republicans and Democrats. And when you've got an integrative software that tracks that and also is part of ballot creation, you can start creating ballots or ballot images. And these NGOs have a knack for finding these ballots at an industrial scale. And if you're dropping them in drop boxes that have no surveillance, um, you know, you don't have to do any hacking of the poll book. You don't have to do any hacking of the tabulator. The cheat's really been accomplished during early voting. And so those are the things that are really problematic, is that there's a way to subvert every single phase of that assembly line of the way that we vote. And so it's set up in a way that is so compartmentalized that our good election judges, our good poll workers that are honest as the day is long, their ability to really neutralize the cheat is lessened as we get to this integrated cloud-based system. So until we have paper-based systems that are closed system architecture, we really don't give our poll watchers any power. That's the beauty of paper in a precinct, is that they really get to be empowered, not some code in a black box.
I would just add, quickly, obviously keep your eyes on the express vote, or not the express vote. I'm trying to think of the express poll pads that ES&S uses for the incrementing like that. ES&S, if you have, I'm not sure which ones you have, if you have the DS200, the express vote that is the BMD, or if you have the DS200 that, well, you said you have a paper ballot. So I'm assuming that it's a hand marked paper ballot and not a BMD printout like the Dominion ICX or I think it's the express vote DS200. If you have any errors, like, just throughout the day, one person comes up to you and says, hey, this isn't who I voted for, document that. Yeah. Because, I talked about this on when I did the curling thing on my platform. Halderman said himself that a poll manager will say, well, I just had one error all day. That's all it took. But it's only if it's designed to cheat, it's only designed to cheat on a small percentage of the ballots, and it's designed to work properly if it detects that the cheating's been detected. And so, a lot of poll watchers look at that, or poll managers, they look at that and they're like, well, it was just a mistake. You probably fat fingered the wrong candidate, whatever the case might be. And then they chalk it off as human error. We fixed it. And that's not the case. So that's one thing. Also, it's very easy to check whether or not the DS200s are connected to the internet. I would learn how to do that and ensure that there is no connectivity there as well. But other than that, just stay frosty and keep your eyes on everything. If you want to increment like they did in Williamson, Tennessee, and every voter that checks in, keep a hand tally as well, and make sure at the end of the night that your hand tally checks out with how many ballots you have in that machine's bin. And other than that, thank you for doing that, for being involved in your elections. We need more patriots in that role.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah. And there's a certification piece of paperwork. So everyone that participates, they're going to certify to the degree that they were responsible for a piece of the pie that they're signing off. And so have the courage to withhold your certification if you see something amiss. So that's really the true unsung power that they're really afraid of, are a bunch of precinct election workers saying, I can't certify what I just saw.
Amen. Amen. All right. Professor Clements, Aaron Clements, thank you both so much for joining tonight. I'm glad we were able to get this on the record here. I think the prisoner's record. That was the J6 part, the professor's record. It was great to talk with you guys again. I do miss you a lot, and hopefully, some event brings us together again and we can hang out and have dinner and drink some cheap whiskey. And
awesome.
Thank you guys so much for jumping on.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Take care.
All right. God bless. All right, folks, there it is. Professor David Clements and his lovely wife, Erin Clements. They are absolutely awesome. I've known them now for 4 or 5 years. And I'll tell you what, Professor Clements was helped me with sanity going through all this, right? He was the voice of reason, the calm, cool, collected guy, but brilliant in his approach in doing all this. So I'm grateful to have them in this fight. And I'm grateful for all you guys. So please, if you have not done so yet, hit that thumbs up, share this video out, have your friends check it out if they still think elections are free and fair. We do have sponsors down below, mypillow.com. Speaking of Mike Lindell, promo code CanCon, save up to, I think it's 65%. So you guys can get some Giza Dream Sheets. You guys could get the slippers, all the great stuff there. I love the slippers. I'm going to talk about the slippers every time. And I've also got another sponsor down there, My Mushroom Vibe. If you guys are into microdosing or you want to give a shot at microdosing, they have some great products down there. I've got a direct link that will help us out as well. So check them out, help support the show. And other than that, just hit the thumbs up. And thank you guys all so much for joining in. Stay frosty. God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. Make the fortune cookie country pay for this.
It is a reliable source. It's what they used to lock us up for January 6th. The same data. The same exact data. Open your eyes to a new world that you never knew existed.